Pleasure to introduce our panelists who will be giving us an understanding of some of the important regulatory issues and frameworks that we have to deal with when thinking about electronic and mobile transactions. We're going to have both a Lebanese perspective and a regional perspective so that we can all have a kind of understanding of some of the challenges that we have in regulating this space, as well as some of the major steps that we're making towards regulating it. My pleasure to introduce, next to me to the right, Dr. Nibal Idlebi, Chief of the ICT Applications at ESCWA, Salam Yamout, National ICT Strategy Coordinator at the Presidency of the Council of Ministers, and Sheikh Ramzy, who is the Executive Director of Payment Systems at the Central Bank of Lebanon. I'm actually going to open up first the floor a little bit for opening remarks, starting with Dr. Idlebi. I'd like to ask you to give us a sense of the regional perspective, since you're at ESCWA and you really work kind of covering the region. Can you give us a sense of where these transaction laws are and how much more forward do we have to go?
In fact, let us start by saying why we need this legal framework. In fact,
sure.
Legal framework, in fact, it's the component for building trust in e-transaction and e-services. We have identified in the region that there is the lack of use of e-services and even cyberspace. One of the reasons behind that is lacks of confidence and of security of these cyberspace. People are not convinced till now that they can make their transactions safely. In a very operational way and very professional way. For that reason, I mean, one of the components for improving for building trust, in fact, in e-services and cyberspace is to improve the legal and regulatory framework. And legal and regulatory framework for cyberspace, we know that in the Arab region we are progressing. There are many changes, especially in the last few years. In fact, there are many e-laws, in fact, such as, for example, here we are speaking more about e-transaction and e-signature law, which are very important for improving the use of e-services, specifically for e-commerce, for example, and for e-government, for all kind of e-services. Then, in fact, in the region, we find that there are many laws recently, and most of the countries, they do have e-transaction law, except some countries like Lebanon, for example, who are developing one now currently, and I think Mr. Yamout will speak about it. And we do have, for example, in the Gulf country, we find it all over the Gulf country, they do have e-transaction and even e-commerce law. While in some countries like Iraq, Palestine, Yemen, they don't have till now laws for e-transaction and e-commerce. Many countries, they do have e-transaction and e-signature. In general, they are common together, e-transaction and e-signature law, they are combined together in one, while few of the Arab countries do have law for e-commerce. Then here, there are some differentiation. One of the most developed countries in the e-transaction, in the cyber law in general, is Tunisia and Morocco, in fact. They are really very developed, as well as Dubai specifically, not the UAE, Dubai itself, as well as Bahrain, for example. When we speak about payment, in fact, there is a few countries who have really regulation for e-payments. In general, they don't have general law. There are some regulation, in general, originated from the banking, from the central bank in many countries. And in many countries, in fact, the e-transaction doesn't cover the e-payment issues. Many of the countries, they don't include it, in fact, in the e-transaction law. They put it under, because, in fact, the banks, the central bank, they don't like to include this specific regulation, let us say, in generic one, which is governed by the government as a whole. They want to be specific and under their control. Then, in general, all the e-payment, it is related to the central bank, like, for example, in Lebanon, or even in Qatar, as well as in Yemen, for example. There is something strange that Lebanon, for example, they are not very well advanced in cyber law in general, but they are advanced in e-payment regulation as of the Central Bank of Lebanon. The same for Yemen, for example. Yemen, they don't have cyber law as a package, but they are advanced in e-payment specifically. Then there are some differentiation, and I would like to mention that at ESCWA we have developed a kind of cyber legislation directives which cover 6 areas of cyber law, which is normally it is developed by ESCWA in order to enhance the development of cyber law in general in the region. This is our new baby, let us say, which is a package of 6 directives for cyber legislation covering e-transaction, e-communication, freedom of expression, cybercrime, IPR on cyberspace, as well as the protection of personal data protection. Then this is, overview, let us say, of e-transaction in the region. On the slide here, we can see that, for example, in many countries, we have e-transaction law, قانون المعاملات الإلكترونية. In general, it is combined with قانون التوقيع الإلكتروني or e-signature law. And in some countries, we have e-commerce law. In fact, in some countries like Qatar and Bahrain, they have only one law which covers all the aspects, in fact, while others, they do have only only e-transaction and e-communication. We identify here that many countries do have both of them, but not, for example, Lebanon. It is on the way. Not, for example, Kuwait. Kuwait, they do have one, but it is in the parliament currently. And the same for Palestine, I think. They don't have anyone. This is the general view.
So I just counted the numbers up, and we've got about 10 out of 7 that have a e-transaction law, about 10 out of 7 that have an e-signature law, and only, sorry, 17, not 7. There's 10 out of 17, 10 out of 17, and only actually 6 out of 17 that have e-commerce laws. So that's an interesting thing, and often I'm seeing, just a quick observation, that the countries that have 2 tend to have 3. The countries, either they're pretty advanced and they've got all of them, or they're pretty delayed and they've got almost none of them, or maybe just one of them.
When our law will be adopted by the parliament, so the 3 are in one for us.
Okay, excellent. Well, we look forward to that date, which actually brings us to our next question, to Salam. Salam, we've heard about this law for a long time. Where is it? Is it coming someday?
Where is it? No, it's true that when we started in 1996, believe it or not. We needed only one article, which is in Usul al-Muhakamat. In Lebanon, one of the main problems not identified by my colleague is the burden of proof. So what do you do when you have a transaction, a contract that is signed electronically? Well, in Lebanon, the judge يرفض الاستماع, and it doesn't look at the evidence because it doesn't exist. So we needed just one law, one article that says the judge can look at an e-signature law, and we said by this time there was the EU directives and now the Arab directives that pretty much, as Nibal explained, cover all kinds of e-transactions, e-commerce, and national electronic publication using the internet, the rights and responsibilities of the, not the service provider per se, but of the web hosts, of the users, and data privacy, and all these things. So we started working on them in 2004 at a global package, not at one individual article. And that law twice got rejected by the Lebanese parliament at the last phase. The last time it was rejected was in August 2011. I would say for the right cause. The law was then became very much à la Libanaise. We wanted to please everybody, so it had a bit of Irish law, a bit of Indian law, a bit of EU law. It had a hay'a musta'illi that does data privacy and gives licenses. It became very much a convoluted law, and forgot that at the basic of this, all we needed to do is to allow any e-signature, doesn't matter what it is, an email or any kind of valid e-signature, to be at least looked at and accepted by the law system. So we went back to writing it in September of 2011 by directions of the Prime Minister. And we included for the first time members of the private sector in the drafting committee. We were 9. So 5 of us were government employees and 4 were representatives of the private sector. And we're happy to say that when I come back today to the office, I should have received the last draft document. With it, the e-payment section, an e-payment chapter sent by the central bank. And I'm going to promise you all, please don't make me, that this law will be circulated and will be available for consultations so that you have time to lobby for it and push it with the members, with your member of parliaments, because it is time that it passes. We should say that it should pass in 2012.
1996, 2012. 16 years.
At least I'm not lying, I'm telling the truth.
Well, I think we've got maybe some people who are in the front row have been struggling with some regulatory frameworks in mobile payments. Okay, so Sheikh Ramzy, tell us a little bit about what the central bank is doing to regulate this sector. And I know that we've seen in the sheet that Lebanon doesn't have regulations, but then Dr. Nibal told us that actually Lebanon is quite advanced in the e-payment space, in particular.
Thank you for Nibal. That corrects your information. Lebanon is doing everything or trying to do and to play its role in this field since a long, about more than 10 years, since our governor, Mr. Salam, he is in charge in the central bank. So everything was prepared, and we have a lot of things to do. We are bound to some laws on some regulations. We studied and the first exercise we did with the World Bank and then with the IMF on annual basis. We studied our payment system in law on all the instruments circulated, and then what we can update or change in our circulars that will bind all the financial sector in Lebanon. We did it smoothly and successfully. And what is still, it is the major thing that makes us late in in regulating some instruments, like what Mr. Yamout said about, which is the e-signature or all the 3. The Lebanese, I think they will surprise the Arab countries or the world when their e-signature law will be approved by the parliament, and the central bank will surprise its community also what he is preparing after this law. About the electronic banking, we began and we take some major revolution in the country. The revolution was because we have a very important and strong banking sector in Lebanon, and he was ready, although in the years when we were unstable country, okay, because in 1993 the central bank has no right or does not have the power to regulate the electronic transactions. So we asked for amending this law, and which took 4 years to be approved. So at that time, you see the Lebanese banking are going on electronic means, and especially you see the plastic cards is in all Lebanon, and no role for the central bank. The central bank make comments or make advices for the bank not to proceed in that way, because every bank has its own solution, and every person that had a lot of cards of the banks. Okay,
so if I could just interrupt you. So beyond the cards, right? the future now, and we're going to talk about this in the next session, is mobile payments. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing to regulate in the mobile payment space.
Okay, mobile payments, if we want to speak about mobile payments in this session and in this time, and we don't have this law, you must benefit from what did the central bank do in the electronic payments regarding the ATM transaction and POS solution. Okay. Which was a revolutionary, and of course, if you want to know what is the central bank is preparing, you must know what we prepared or what we gave a solution about the ATMs and the POS solution. About the mobile payment and the mobile banking, you know, we have issued a circular about the electronic transactions since 2000, and it is known by the electronic transactions in Lebanon. So it is, and mobile banking and mobile payments is under the umbrella of this circular. And what now we are giving a license because the banks in certain ATMs or any electronic solution products, the banks can take or can inform or take the approval from the bank. But such instruments that it is now evolving, and it is in the early stage in Lebanon. If you see how the community is have transactions with the payments, the electronic means, and now another electronic mean, the mobile payments. Now you see that you must be careful to adopt this solution, because if you see the Lebanese community, how many cars are in the market? How, if you see indicator, the other indicator that although what we are improving the electronic means by the cars, the growth, it is very slowly, but we see every year an increase in the volume of the checks circulated or cleared in Lebanon. It does not decline either 1%. Always we have an increase till now, and the statistics that we have for the 2000. So there is a place that we must be careful, we and the vendors and the service providers about this issue. But the central bank have encouraged in a certain place the mobile banking. And it is in circulars since 5 years. When we in using the cards in Lebanon, we make a request. All the banks are requested to send an SMS for the cardholder when his card is used on any means, on the ATM or on the point of sale or on the internet. So we introduce the SMS in that field. And so it is as we are encouraging them to use the mobile banking. But what we look for, we look for the customer satisfaction and security. Our financial sector to be secure, and in all cases, the central bank is always doing under a preservative mood, always in a preservative mood. So we cannot go with any, if we did not study it well. Now, of course, we are preparing, and we are taking some actions, it is not a secret because Salam was with us. We have a mission from the World Bank about studying the mobile payments and mobile bankings. I was not happy with some aspect that the mission took from the major players in Lebanon. of course, we will do it. Because I think there were some misunderstanding or there some issue that was not clear with the banks or the vendors or the suppliers that they met. Because nowadays, we are preparing to launch our new payment system that it's expandable and that accepts any new products for the future, and especially the electronic ones. We are prepared. The system will be launched in May, and the clearing, electronic clearing, the fully electronic clearing, it will be launched in October. So they are fully electronic, and they accept, if we regulate the mobile payments and banking instructions, or so, if it can be a member in that. But you must remember that we have a secrecy law, we have the anti-money laundering law, we have other aspects that we must respect.
Thank you. I want to ask one more question, actually, quick topic, and then open the floor for questions. So mobile banking, since that's what we're talking about, sorry, mobile payments, since that's what we're talking about next. There's a complex relationship between the telecom operator, between the central bank, or between the banks. Whose job is this? What are the regulations surrounding this? We are going to see a mobile operator next who's doing mobile money in Jordan. We're going to see two other companies, third parties that are doing mobile payments. That's the next panel. Tell us about what the experience in Lebanon is. I know that we've got some mobile payments providers here. But what are the restrictions and what are the challenges from any of you? If you'll tell us the relationship between all these players. Salam, why don't you start us off?
Well, you know, the mobile payments is different country to country because it depends on the regulations at the country. Lebanon banking sector is heavily regulated. Any person, entity, company that is holding, depositing third party or people's money accounts, even if it's a small amount, has to be licensed by the central bank. So that means in Lebanon, we could not have the model that exists in some mobile payment elsewhere, that the telecom provider also, like, you know, I want to pay Nibal some money, then it's held by the MTC Touch or Alpha or the mobile. In Lebanon, this is unfortunately not possible. The central bank is aware of that, and I let my colleague from the central bank to continue whether they have plans to keep this as it is or whether they plan to make an exception for small amounts of money for mobile payments.
Any financial action, the central bank is not far, it is involved. So one of the major issues or the important issues, you know, we have a banking control committee. For the payment system, there is, plus the role of the banking control, there is what is meant, what is not established yet in Lebanon, but will be established with after launching our new system. There is the oversight of the payment system and the payment instruments. So any instrument, it must be overseen by the central bank. So this is a new issue that will be.
But is this really like, can't I have the credit in my account and I already have a credit in my mobile account, right? I buy units. Is that money? Can I just transfer my credits to you and then you have credits and I've transferred money, but do I need a bank? And is this a financial transaction that the central bank needs to regulate?
Where the money goes?
The money goes to my mobile account, which I can use to pay for maybe, let's forget the second part.
No,
you
transferred credits. Yeah. You did not transfer money.
Right, let's say we're all transferring minutes to each other. Aren't we eventually transferring money?
No.
Why, because we can't cash out?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to get to, right? So the biggest problem then, it sounds like, is that I can transfer as many minutes, units, whatever you want to call them, but no one ever can cash them out.
Yes.
The person who will benefit from the mobile bank, if I'm going to pay for a parking, okay, I will make a mobile payment for him. This person in the park, he needs his money, not his units.
So then we're back to the same problem, which is the cash out.
No, let me say something. We discussed this with the central bank. For example, if there was an application to pay for your park meters, you know now in Beirut you have to pay money to park your car. If it's a transaction to pay for a certain service, it can be done. What you need the license for is to hold to a depositor's account. That means if I have in my possession money that belongs to Nibal, I am not allowed to do this unless I'm regulated.
So I, as a telecom operator, cannot hold Nibal's money?
Money.
But I can hold her units.
On behalf of somebody, yes.
I can hold her units, and I can, in theory, she can use them to pay other people if they accept units. But as long as it's not money.
It's not money,
okay.
You know, it's
Understood.
not money.
Okay. Nibal, can you give us a sense of how this is maybe in other countries?
Yeah, in fact, it depends from one country to another. It is related completely related to the central bank and how he regulates the money. But any transaction money, if it is money, not units, here you have to, it should be regulated and there should be a kind of financial authorization from the central bank. It depends from one, I mean, there is no general point of view.
What do you think is the country that is most advanced in mobile payments?
I think it is Qatar and Bahrain.
So let's focus on Qatar. How do they do it?
I don't have really deep information about it, but I know that they are very well developed, to tell you the truth. But I don't know very much, but they have they are quite sophisticated, yeah.
Okay, I want to open the panel for questions. Got lots of questions, great. First question.
Hi.
Let's try to keep the questions and answers as brief as possible so we can get as many in as possible. Yes, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Okay, Danny Abla, founder of PinPay, which is a mobile payment service. I have actually two questions. The first one is in general, and the other one is addressed to Mr. Ramzy Hamadeh. The first one is 16 years. It's a lot of time. We're not going to argue on this, but as professionals, we need to know who is responsible of this delay, because we need to know how to professionally lobby for those who are delaying this. The opportunity cost is huge. 16 years is not something, in technology years, we are talking not decades, we are talking centuries. And who should we lobby to, and to avoid the new big thing, the new things to be delayed in the same way? Because in Lebanon, if we have something working for us, is the banking sector. And we cannot afford to be brought back to the Stone Age because we're not advancing.
Remember, we said short questions.
This is, I really need to know who are the parties that are delaying this. This is one. Two, for mobile payments. There's something very funny in the system that doesn't need KYC, which are prepaid cards. Everybody can issue prepaid cards and they can start using them. Can't we do the same thing for mobile payments?
Back to my question of units. And what is it?
With units, there is like a backdoor to it, is that they expire. So they're not holding deposits. But when a store issues a credit card, a prepaid card, they are doing the same thing. I mean, you can do loyalties. Why not? So can you please elaborate on this? Thank you.
Prepaid card with a certain store. It's a commercial transaction between me and, say, is Zara or whatever, or ABC or whatever. You know, it's a special transaction. I paid ABC money, so it's not, ABC is not holding money on behalf of, you know. And again, the money cannot be translated. I mean, the card, the prepaid card, as a general rule of thumb, if you can transfer that account to cash money, then yes, the ABC becomes depositors and maybe the central bank should regulate them. But in the case of the stores or the prepaid cards, you know, you cannot transfer that amount to real cash.
So technically, if we have a conglomerate of merchants, we can start issuing prepaid cards that are used at these merchants, right?
As a mobile payment provider, if you make a business deal with ABC, with Zara, with etc., to allow them to move the prepaid card through their mobile, I think you don't need a license. If you agree with Bank Audi or Bank X to move accounts of other people on their behalf using the phone, also you have no problem, you know?
One comment related to the package of cyber law in Lebanon, in fact. It's amazing to know that Lebanon was the first country in the region to develop cyber law, to prepare cyber law. There was a project with the European Union called ECOMLab. In fact, it was in 2000, and they have developed a package of cyber law covering not only e-transaction and e-commerce and e-payment and such issue, but it covers everything, cybercrime that I told you about, e-communication, everything. It was very important package. Unfortunately, it was, I mean, the product of the project, it was like a study project, but it was not translated into laws. It was, the preparation was done, but the law, the formulation into laws, I mean, there is problem. I want to mention also that in Lebanon, there is very high expert in cyber laws. I mean, and we at ESCWA, all the experts that we are working on, because we are, I mean, myself, I'm expert in ICT, not in law, but I mean, we worked with the very high level people from Lebanon, and all of them are Lebanese. I mean,
which brings us to
the issue here, maybe it is more the government.
Too many cooks spoil the...
Yeah, but exactly, this, which brings me to my first question. We need to have a face to
Who's the
those
person
that are delaying this.
I'm the person now. No, I can't. Okay, Afallah Amma Mada. Okay, I can. No, the 16 years, I don't know what happened, but basically, some members of parliament and also people who made this law didn't pass is the private sector twice in 2011 and 2010, a year before. It's the private sector with the social media who shot at the law. Final stages of it, when it was at the final stages of passing at the parliament. And you know what? I'm glad they did. I'm very glad I did, because today we have a better, I believe we have a better law. Today I am responsible. That means as of tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I think you are responsible. You should talk to your ministers and mainly to your parliamentarians. No, what will happen is now the president of the Council of Ministers, and not to be, in order to be totally transparent with you, there are two little things still bothering us in the law. We are going to go ahead and present it. The time it took me 6 months, September, 6 months to do the new version of the law, and we started from the ECOMLab project. So we had that as a draft, because it's very difficult to build consensus. Every ministry wants the mandate for itself. Every person wants to think it's a political issue or somebody is behind, some kind of company. It was like walking on eggs at every single step. I think we were able to move all the burdens. We still have one potential problem, because we have 3 ministers on one side and 2 ministers on the other side, is who is the accreditation authority for the certification authority which issues digital signatures. I don't know, those of you who are familiar with the certificate authority, so like Global Sign or VeriSign or Echo Sign, today I hear about it. These are companies who allow you the means to have a digital signature. These companies have to be accredited. We are saying in the new law they should not be licensed. They are free to operate, but if they are accredited by a Lebanese government, then they have a better burden of proof. They have a higher level of proof, you know, as if...
Let's try to take another question.
مرحبا أنا اسمي سعيد عمر from an e-commerce company in Jordan, basically. Much of what you said is really like it seemed to me like interbank relations. How can you as bankers and theorists probably think of instruments or solutions for the small guy, for the e-commerce small companies? And do you have anything that can help the e-commerce people sell more? I mean, much of what you said I did not really understand. I'm just trying to make sense of all what you just said. And to me, as an e-commerce company, all I can think of as a solution for payments is basically go online and get connected with PayPal. And none of what you just said made sense to me. So I'm just trying to make sense really, really hard, basically. How can you, I mean, in Jordan we fired our governor last year, so I don't know what went on with that, basically, but you guys...
fired their governor.
Yeah, I mean, in Jordan, basically. So he was trying to innovate, and I don't know what went on, basically. But you guys at the center bank, let's say, what do you think of the small people or the e-commerce websites out there, and how do you serve them? That's my question, basically.
So,
Right.
and I'll add to that. In thinking about these laws, do you think of e-commerce websites? Yes. No, you just have to wait.
In fact, normally, the transaction between banks, normally it is regulated. I mean, there are many relationships between banks. But normally when you have regulation for e-payment, it regulates also the relationship between citizen, I mean, anybody, individual, and the banks, in fact. And it gives you the rights, define what are your rules and what are your rights normally, I mean, as individual or as a small company vis-a-vis the banks. But of course, I mean, banks are very much developed in e-transaction previously. I mean, many years ago, I mean, it happened before internet and before all these issues. But I think one of the issues that targeted by laws or e-laws or e-payment here, it's also to regulate the relationship between small, medium enterprise and the banks, as well as the individual, and to know their rights and so on. As for your concern about e-commerce and so on, I think here it's not only payment, it is also the kind of consumer protection, it is kind of another regulation which is needed for e-commerce law, which have some interaction between companies, how to regulate interaction between companies, not only not only from point of view of payment. It is not only point of view of payment, it is also transaction and interrelationship between the different parties.
By the circular 69 adopted by the central bank and the decision 7548, when we say it is a decision on electronic financial and banking transactions, I want to read 4 lines that are important and may answer for the purpose of implementing the provisions of this decision. All operations and activities that are concluded, carried out, or promoted through electronic or photoelectric means, telephone, computer, internet, ATM, etc., by banks, financial institutions, financial intermediaries, mutual funds, or any other institution or entity shall be considered electronic financial and banking transactions. This definition applies to cooperations undertaken by issuers or promoters of payment and credit cards, and by institutions involved in electronic transfers. It also applies to institutions involved in offer, purchase, and sale operations, and in the provision of other electronic services related to financial instruments, as well as their settlement and compensation centers. Now, this is base, and what the central bank receives, if this is a huge, or it is wide angle, wide opportunity for all what we mentioned. What are the interested parties that we face, or they came to the central bank and asked? If you see the companies that make transfer money, they transfer money, so they were regulated and they were amended. So if we did not receive a request from the parties, no, you have an issuer, and in every service or every product, you have an issuer or use, and there are the counterparty, the beneficiary. You must look to both. This is not one way. Money, goes from one place to another place. Payment goes from one place to another place. You must study both cases at the same time. So this is, it is a base. What we are facing under this, everything that came, it is studied and it is regulated. So if we receive, then we will study and we will act. What we are preparing, we are now preparing our new system to be expandable for everything, and these new issues, and we know what is the future of mobile banking and mobile payment, but we must take care for our society and our clients.
Salam.
Quickly, e-commerce in the world, I mean, B2C, I'm not talking B2B, it's mainly credit card driven, okay, with the exception of PayPal and, you know, whatever. And the problem is not necessarily central banks or heavy regulations. The problem also is international. I mean, some countries have risks for payments, so that's why, for example, Lebanon hasn't done very well in other means of payment. And sometimes it's the market that means, you know, Jordan, Lebanon, Dubai, we are small countries, we have small populations. If we had a bigger buying mass, I'm sure we'd have like an Arabic PayPal or, you know, other means than credit card, if that answers your question.
Hold on, guys. We have to wrap up.
So, neither the e-money regulation is there, neither the e-signature, and even in the Article 69, which I know by heart.
I hear your point. You know, I think it's regulation. I think there is more than regulation. I think there's also market size, and we can discuss.
Just 1 minute. There is in some Arab countries, like for example in Dubai, you have e-dirham. They have a national project for the payment, for the e-payment, in fact.
And Saudi Arabia,
and Saudi Arabia, there is Sadat. Sadat, it's very interesting solution for e-payment, and it is in fact developed locally in Saudi Arabia, and it is used by government for paying all the bills and so on, as well as by private sector. Then there are some solution, regional solution, let us say, and Sadat, I know that Sadat is, many other countries are trying to replicate the same system according to their local conditions in many Arab countries.
Okay, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our panelists. I know this is quite a different setting than the business discussion that we're used to, but I thought that, or we thought it would be important for us to understand a little bit about the regulatory frameworks, since they are certainly important, critical, sometimes the most important challenges, or creating the most important opportunities in this sector. So I'd like to thank the panelists. Thank you very much for being with us.